This week, we get you the voices from the continent on one of the most competitive and biggest elections in West Africa. To divide our opinion on Africa's support and stance on the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict. This is World of Africa. Welcome to the program. I'm Eric Njoka. M23 rebel group has seized more territory in the conflict-hit Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. Rebels captured Mushaki and Rubaya areas, and residents have fled to escape fighting. The M23 rebels were set to begin withdrawing from some territories they recently seized. The ongoing conflict has displaced hundreds of thousands of people in the last 6 months. French President Emmanuel Macron is expected to outline a new Africa policy ahead of his visit to 4 African countries beginning next week. He is expected to visit Gabon for an environmental summit, then Angola, Congo-Brazzaville, and the neighboring Democratic Republic of Congo. This as Paris seeks to counter growing Russian and Chinese influence in the region. Anti-French sentiments have been running high in some of its former colonies in the Sahel. And a Dutch technology company has developed a smart camera that is helping wildlife conservationists in Africa tackle widespread poaching. Hack the Planet says its artificial intelligence-powered system can help detect both poachers and animals in real time. This is a boon for national parks, which cover vast areas, making it physically impossible for the small number of rangers to be everywhere all the time. Engineers say the system consists of a camera trap that has been slightly modified so that it can wirelessly talk to a mini computer. It then uses a satellite modem to send the information through space directly to the phones of rangers within minutes. It was tipped to be the biggest election this year in the continent. For almost a year, various aspirants traversed the vast nation to woo Nigerians to vote for them as president, vice president, senator, or even representative. The turnout, as expected, was very high, and the world watched with anticipation as Africa's largest democracy went to the ballot. On this World of Africa report, our correspondent Louisa Olaniyi recaps the nation's most hotly contested polls.
Nigerians, both young and old, defied all odds to vote on the 25th of February in the elections across the Federation's 36 states, despite hurdles and violence before, during and after the polls.
So when I saw the situation, I had to leave the place. As I left the place, there was a big fight, and I had to go to a particular place. I brought my phone, I recorded what was happening. So, but now even the LGA chairman of Labour Party, they were beating him. One of them that brought out his phone to record it, they collected his phone from him and beat him. He fell. He sustained a lot of injuries.
Outgoing President Muhammadu Buhari is set to step down in May after 8 years amidst a range of issues, from banditry, unemployment, economic mess, fuel scarcity, and the cash crisis caused by the Naira redesign policy facing the country. President Buhari has promised a peaceful transition, although there are doubts over whether the elections have been free and fair.
The election has gone beyond, below expectation. And it's not what they promised Nigeria, INEC, they delivered. They promised automatic uploading and all that. At the end of the day, look at what the story we are hearing.
If they don't get what they want, there's going to be problem because youth are not happy. Everybody is angry. If they don't get the result they saw, because everybody saw what happened at the polling unit, to count everything, how everything went. If they don't get what they want, there's going to be a problem in this country. So they had better provide the result, as people have seen.
Nigeria's president is elected by a modified 2-round system. To be elected in the first round and obviate runoff, a candidate must bag more than 25% of the votes in at least 24 of the 36 states and the Federal Capital Territory. If no candidate makes the cut, a runoff is held between the 2 leading contenders. Bola Ahmed Tinubu and Kashima Shettima of the ruling APC are two prominent contestants who are Muslims and also from the same region as President Buhari. Then there's a third, an eastern contender in Peter Obi, seen as favourite of the youth, who are 34% of the electorate. And Obi is said to stand a good chance of becoming the first elected president from the southeast, a region riddled with violence by armed secessionist groups.
The expectation is just to improve on our technology, improve on our mode and conduct of the elections. And I think Nigeria will be in head around it.
Well, international observers have berated Nigeria's umpire on the conduct of the election as political parties continue to dispute election results. So far, the top three political party contenders continue to spring up surprises, especially at strongholds where you wouldn't think a particular party would pull through. Lagos, for example, have been swept up by the Labour Party, where analysts have foreseen Bola Ahmed Tinubu of the APC having a stronghold. But like I said, quite a lot of surprises are springing up. So far, about 23 states election results have been announced by INEC, with Bola Ahmed Tinubu of the APC clinching about 9 states, Labour Party and the PDP presidential candidates taking 7 states each.
Since Russia invaded Ukraine in February last year, the United States and European governments have been scrutinizing Africa's reactions. Views from the continent vary, with many states taking a non-aligned position. The division was revealed at the United Nations when African countries voted on the war. It is evident that African states have a cynical view of a global order whose rule seems to be determined by the West. Let's try and understand the reasons for the split in opinion in this next report.
On the 24th of February, the United Nations convened to vote on a resolution to redouble support for diplomatic efforts to achieve a comprehensive, just and lasting peace in Ukraine. It was backed by 141 nations, with 32 abstaining and 7 voting against. This is how Africa voted. 30 countries, just 2 more than last year, voted in favor of the resolution that condemned Russia, supported Ukraine's territorial integrity and called for peace. African nations accounted for nearly half of all abstentions. Gabon, which changed its vote from being in favor of the pro-Ukraine resolution last year, was among the 15 African nations that abstained. Officially, these countries say their position is not aligned with either Russia or Western-backed Ukraine. Barely a day before the UN vote, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky made a phone call to his Ugandan counterpart, Yoweri Museveni. The country abstained from Thursday's vote, as it did a year ago. President Volodymyr Zelensky says Ukraine needs to deepen cooperation with countries in Africa and Latin America to counter Russia's influence.
I believe Ukraine really needs to take steps forward to meet the countries of the African continent. We didn't work well for many years. We didn't pay attention. I think it's a big mistake.
When war struck a year ago, thousands of Indians and Africans in Ukraine, including students, instantly turned refugees. They were facing discrimination and other difficulties while trying to return to their native countries, something that irked leaders in the continent.
Nous donnons écho ici au cri d'alarme des ressortissants et étudiants africains.
We echo here the outcry of African students who are fleeing the war in Ukraine and are facing discrimination in their exodus in search of shelter. This situation is unacceptable. We say no to racism and demand respect for human dignity, while calling for the fair treatment of all people in distress.
Tout en appelant au traitement équitable de toutes les personnes en détresse.
But it's not only about the past. Nations like Eritrea and lately Mali, both largely isolated from the global community, have found an ally in Russia. They were among African countries that recently hosted Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, and both voted against the UN resolution. Some African countries had a decades-old relationship with the Soviet Union. After it collapsed in 1991, their ties continued with Russia. Many African independence leaders believe that supply of weapons and military training were key to the fight against white minority rule and colonialism. African Union President Macky Sall used this logic to explain the refusal of many African nations to take sides in the crisis.
We are no longer in the colonial era. We are in 2022. Countries, even if they are poor, are of equal dignity, so we must treat their problems with the same respect. Africa is not against Ukraine. We should not have the impression that Africans are insensitive to the situation in Ukraine. It is not that at all.
South Africa even hosted military exercises with China and Russia. It denied that the war games were provocatively timed to coincide with the first anniversary of the Ukraine war.
Our relationship with Russia and friendship has been in place for a long time, and that relationship still exists. Does it necessarily mean by so doing we support the war? I would argue no. What we disagree with the other nation is not that Russia was correct or not. What we disagree is the proposed response to it.
Western leaders now regard Russia as a major security threat, challenging the very foundations of democracy and the rules-based international system. However, some African governments are reluctant to buy into this negative perception of the Putin regime. While the UN resolution vote is not legally binding, it will no doubt continue to shape geopolitical alliances in the months and years to come. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
A steady flow of taxis has rolled up outside the Ivorian embassy in Tunis in recent days, depositing dozens of migrants who say they no longer feel safe amid an officially sanctioned climate of fear. After a wave of arrests in recent weeks, President Kais Saied gave a speech that critics said was openly racist. Many sub-Saharan Africans in Tunisia are now heading for the exit. The authorities now claim that the president was misunderstood. But what's really causing friction in the North African country when it comes to the issue of migrants? Our next report explores.
These were the scenes at Tunisia's capital over the weekend. Fury, condemnation and shame was loud in their voices. Hundreds of Tunisians were angry at President Kais Saied.
The hate speech, the call to violence, the call to hatred against our sub-Saharan brothers and sisters does not represent Tunisia, does not represent Tunisians. It is a shame. It's true that we all have suffered, but we will not give up. We will go all the way to rebuild Tunisia's reputation, a Tunisia known as a welcoming land and not a racist one.
The president is accused of being racist after he said that hordes of sub-Saharan migrants were causing crime and pose a demographic threat. His words caused outrage in the country, forcing Kais Saied to clarify.
To all leaders at every level, look after our brothers from sub-Saharan Africa who are in a legal situation.
But it was too late. Many who flooded the streets demanded that the president apologize to sub-Saharan migrants.
I told the authorities clearly that if we have castrated their voice, the sub-Saharan migrants, there are 1,000 more voices that rise to demand rights.
The president's remarks irked especially the black citizens living in the country. Sub-Saharan migrants gathered outside the Ivorian embassy in Tunis to apply for repatriation, as they say they no longer feel safe.
Landlords are kicking us out. We are beaten and mistreated. For more security, we prefer to come to our embassy to register to return to Ivory Coast.
The words of the statement read on the page of the Tunisian presidency really triggered a psychosis within the community. The sub-Saharan community felt abandoned. It felt like a mob simply because of the hate speech that had been on social media for a long time.
Located at the northernmost tip of Africa on the Mediterranean Sea, The country is a destination for people fleeing violence and poverty in sub-Saharan African countries, and a key transit hub for those who board rickety boats across the sea to seek asylum in Europe.
Burkina Faso's revolutionary leader, Thomas Sankara, was reburied this month, 8 years after his body was exhumed as part of an investigation. Sankara's body and those of the 12 people who died with him were interred at the site of his assassination, which has since become a memorial for Sankara. However, some of his relatives attended the funeral, but his widow and children were absent. Here's a report from Ouagadougou.
This is a special funeral in capital Ouagadougou. Exhumed remains of the country's beloved revolutionary ex-president Thomas Sankara were laid to rest afresh. The West African nation was left in shock when Thomas Sankara was murdered in 1987.
We have come to make our contribution to the re-inhumation so that the soul of Thomas Sankara, according to the rites and customs, finds peace. We thank the authorities who wanted to participate in writing a page of history. We thank all those who have contributed to this. In the name of the great family of Thomas Sankara, we thank them.
The charismatic Marxist revolutionary, affectionately known as Africa's Che Guevara, was gunned down along with 12 others. This during a bloody coup led by his former ally and successor, Blaise Compaoré. 37-year-old Sankara and the other victims were buried at a civil cemetery in 1987. Authorities exhumed the remains in 2015 to identify them and help with investigations into his murder. Last year, Compaoré, who now lives in Ivory Coast, was tried in absentia and was declared a convict. A Burkina Faso military tribunal sentenced him to life imprisonment. Compaoré's right-hand man, former spy chief, and 8 others were found guilty of a range of charges, including giving false testimonies and complicity in undermining state security. While Sankara's family was happy that he was finally laid to rest, they say the place of burial was like a slap in the face because of the horrors that occurred there. The family asked the government to bury him elsewhere, but was told it was the army's discretion since Sankara was a soldier.
Beaucoup de charges d'émotion. Pendant longtemps,
there are many charged emotions. For a long time we could not imagine the tragic end, the end of the revolution and of its 12 heroes. Today, to see these coffins and to know that they will leave us forever, it is something not to be recommended to any person. It is a moment of great pain. It is the feeling of a definitive uprooting, and it is on the place where they fell. For us, it is necessary to resurrect them here by taking in on ferment of their spilled blood for the revolution and its legacy.
The West African nation has struggled with an insurgency linked to Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State group, leading to 2 coups last year. The current junta leader, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, has been linked by some to Sankara as an anti-imperialist Pan-African leader. Many believe that Traoré is using the reburial to increase his support base.
After an interruption that lasted 2 years due to the pandemic, Carnival returned to the streets of Bissau, bringing together all ethnic groups in a show of color and unity. Here now is a report from Guinea-Bissau.
For many, Carnival represents an opportunity to celebrate the country's diverse cultural heritage. This year, Guinea-Bissau is celebrating conservation of tradition and biodiversity through fashion and dance. Neighboring Senegal is the guest of honor.
The Guinea-Bissau Carnival is authentic and original because it shows the customs of each ethnic group in the country and its cultural diversity. Its dynamics, its way of singing, dressing and dancing. It is truly an authentic and original carnival.
Dressed up spectators line the streets of the capital of Bissau. This fashion fusion of past and present reflects how modernity and tradition coexist. Team of performers competed in ceremonial dances that represent traditional events such as the harvest and coming-of-age ceremonies. The emphasis on biodiversity was a common thread throughout.
The elders are trying to save our cultural heritage, but the youth don't want to listen. The government must set up a mechanism to make young people aware of Guinean culture, because our culture is very beautiful.
Despite the eclectic mix of styles, the revelers had another thing in common. They were all having a good time.
Carnival means a lot to me because it allows me to truly feel Guinean. It is with the carnival that we can represent our culture and our way of life. I would like every Guinean to be able to show and live his or her culture, because every day our cultural heritage is disappearing.
In 1984, the festival was taken over by the government, though the country has seen its share of turmoil since then. The now nationwide event crosses ethnic and social lines, each group adding its own sounds, sights and customs. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
It's a wrap on this episode of Wild of Africa. Thank you very much for your time and for watching. Find us on all our social media platforms and talk to us there. We always appreciate feedback. I'm Eric Njoka. I will see you on the next show.